All right, for more on the Greater Sydney lockdown, which has now been extended until July 16, and all those other topics making news today, I'm joined from Sydney by the host of Chris Smith tonight. Chris Smith, and of course from Brisbane, the host of Hardgrave, former Howard Government Minister Gary Hardgrave. Chris, I'll start with you if I can. Late this afternoon we heard, it's reported in the papers, that New South Wales Treasurer Dominic Perrottet reportedly vehemently opposed the extension of lockdown. He's said to be the only one around the cabinet table. Pretty significant, and it's significant that we know about it too.
Significant that it's leaked out, yeah, more than probably what his stance was, but I can understand what he's thinking. He's been bombarded by business, by hospitality in particular, who are screaming the joint down. You understand we don't have JobKeeper. You understand we don't have a bloated job seeker anymore. And he knows the pain out there. It is chronic. You go to some of the key shopping strips in Sydney at the moment, there are enormous numbers of shops that are empty for lease sign out, and this is happening right across the country. We can least afford it in Sydney. And if you've got hotspots, whatever happened to circling the hotspot, like they did with, you know, the northern beaches, and working that way instead of putting the regions as well locked down further when they don't even have a COVID infection. This flies in the face of everything that we have seen and heard from Gladys Berejiklian and Kerry Chant from the get-go.
Yeah, you're spot on. Although, Gary, I have to say, you know, Sydney's 13 days or so into a lockdown. They're going to have another week, 13 days. Victorian small business suffered 112 days in one lockdown only. They had another 3 on top of that. It's funny, you know, maybe it's because Prime Ministers live in Sydney, the world revolves around Sydney, but it's happening in Sydney. And suddenly they had a lot of debate about going into 3 weeks. Poor old Victoria had months and months of it. But this is the problem, isn't it, with lockdowns?
Well, it is, Peter. And don't you reckon everybody in New South Wales wishes they had Anastasia Palaszczuk as their Premier tonight? I mean, this is a woman who puts football matches ahead of anything else, ahead of families, and of course her international travel. I mean, there is no way Queensland can go into any sort of lockdown between now and 2 weeks from now because she's got to go to Tokyo. Yet we've got 9,000 Queenslanders tonight in hotel quarantine or home quarantine, extra cases popping up. But oh, no. All of a sudden, the Premier here is saying, oh, no, it's terrific news. There's only one extra. It's OK. It's only a flesh wound. We'll move on. A week or 3 ago, she was hyping it up that, you know, 1 was enough and we'd shut the place down and we had 3 days sitting on our backside, 4, in fact, counting what happened around Brisbane. So, Peter, it is all over the place. If there's 9 premiers and chief ministers and prime ministers and 9 chief health officers, then you throw in a whole bunch of other people. I reckon there's 54 different views on this pandemic that is now being heard, and people are confused, understandably.
Confused and angry too. I know there's a lot of plaudits, justifiably, for how Gladys Berejiklian has handled things to date. This is the 2nd lockdown in 18 months. I mean, that's a pretty good score as it is, and she reluctantly went there. But I think that you know, the emperor's got no clothes when it comes to some of these premiers.
Absolutely.
I think it's wearing thin. We had cameras out in the streets. Listen to what some Sydney-siders had to say.
Definitely. Well, walking through Pitt Street Mall, it's dead and it's 12:20 during the week when it should be packed.
Sad. Yeah, no life. But again, that's good because that means people are staying at home.
It's getting harder every time. It really is.
We've lost most of our trade, like more than 60-70%.
Unfortunate, but no surprise.
Gary, what do you make of those responses?
Awful. Well, understandable. I mean, the anger is really quite thick on the ground. People, frankly, are frustrated. You know, we put a lot of store in what we're hearing a year or so ago, 15 months ago. We got it. We were told 6 weeks, we're going to kill this thing, we're going to contain it. It was about making sure our health services could catch up, that we had the ICUs, we could have the ventilators in place. Everyone signed up for that because, you know, that's just what we did. It was the month of April, which is a kind of, you know, chopped up month because of Easter and Anzac Day. So we did that. But, Peter, now it's down to this. And if one person has it, we've got to shut the economy down kind of nonsense by a Premier's decree. And there doesn't seem to be any consistency with any of this. Plenty of people know that the vaccine, even though about 9 million people have had one jab, only about 1 million or so have had both jabs. And even then, it doesn't actually prevent you getting the virus. It only just tempers the full effect of the virus. It's not going to put you in hospital. I thought our hospitals were all geared up. That's what the 6 weeks was about 15 months ago. So you're right, Peter. People are sick of it. They're not getting sick from it. They're just sick of it. And there's not the clarity that we need in the leadership, frankly, from anybody opening their yab on this in government right around the country.
And Chris, look, you've got kids in school. I feel for you, but I tell you what, I feel for your wife more. There's a lot of women who are trying to work from the kitchen table and school kids, and you know that not every kid in the country's got their own device, so they're all fighting over 1 or 2 laptops. I think it's really tough. We learnt from Victoria huge academic challenges last year and a lot of mental health consequences. I know the teachers' union's been pretty tough. They don't want teachers in the harm's way, but I can't understand why schools can't open. Surely, if they keep the restrictions elsewhere, why can't we at least get our kids back to school?
Oh, exactly. They say that, you know, the Delta affects young kids as well. OK, isolate where those areas are, put a ring around them, maybe, you know, look at 3 or 4 different schools and say, sorry, you can't go back on Monday. But for the rest of them, for 600 others, why aren't they back at school? And I'm sorry, I've had enough conversations with principals to know the idea of no face-to-face teaching is not successful, has not been successful, and will lead to long-term dysfunction in children's education. Now, I'm on deck next week. My wife is working every day. I'm the one on deck. I can't teach schoolwork. I couldn't tell you what algebra was. I might have done well when I was at school on algebra, but I couldn't tell you. I can't teach. It fails these kids. It's wrong. We've got to get them back in. If you've got COVID somewhere, just go to those hotspots and deal with those schools that way.
Oh, absolutely. I'm worried, Gary, longer term, what our flight schedules in and out of Australia. I mean, gone are the days when you used to pay a lot more money to travel around Australia and go internationally with Qantas. Competition has got those prices down. It means most Australians at some time have gone overseas. I mean, my dad never went overseas. Such was the cost of fares all those years ago. But there's a real concern now by shutting down these arrivals as we have and coming out of the pandemic that we won't have the same sort of carriers coming into Australia. We certainly won't have the same volume of flights. That's a concern too.
Look, Peter, mere mortals like you and Chris and me, we would aspire for a business class seat or, heavens, maybe even put the farm on and go for a first class seat if we're on a really long haul flight. We would aspire to that. The decisions about all of this are being made by people who aren't even in the slightest bit ever likely to find themselves on a commercial flight. They've got their private planes. They are either in private or government planes or UN-owned planes. These are people who do not have any connection at all with the kind of impost you're talking about. The billionaires, the elites, the Hollywood types. I mean, we've got the sort of Tom Hanks and Ron... We've got all of these different... Ronnie Howard, you've got all these people flying in and out of Queensland at the moment for movies, all on their own private planes. And, of course, none of them have to worry about international flights. None of them are worried about the cost of it. Frankly, Peter's probably at a point now where it might be cheaper to go and rent a Learjet, put 20 mates on it and rent that plane rather than pay the commercial price. But then will the Australian officials allow you to land?
Yeah, it's shocking.
Sounds like Hangover in Queensland. Gary?
Hey, I've got to play this.
But we've got so many people. Got so many people flying in and out on their private planes. They don't care. They don't care.
Order. I have to. I can't miss this Norman Swan video. He was opining over who he thinks the best chief health officer in the country is. Let's have a listen.
What a duck.
Who's your favourite chief health officer? Good question.
Well, none of them like me very much.
Who do you reckon's doing the best job?
I think Brett's doing a great job. I think they're all doing actually quite a good job.
I mean, Brett Sutton's running a regime in Victoria that killed 800 of Victorians' own when it escaped from hotel quarantine, the virus. I mean, that's the Court inquiry findings. I don't know what's scarier, Chris, that Swan thinks Brett Sutton's that good or that the audience backed him in.
The audience. I could understand that, you know, Swan gets it wrong. He's got just about everything he said during the pandemic totally wrong. I understand that. I get that. But to have that crowd applaud, you're kidding. The bloke didn't check what was going on in terms of the health response to hotel quarantine, and 800 people died, and he locked down that jurisdiction longer than any other jurisdiction in the world. Well, maybe he deserves an award for lockdowns, but not for the best health officer. Give me a break.
Yeah.
Thank you for restoring some sanity. Chris Smith, Gary Hardgrave, thank you for your time as always.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Peter. Cheers.